Welcome to another edition of our Sawdust City Brewing Happy Hour Tastings. Happy weekend, everybody. I assume you're watching this on the weekend here as we're releasing it on a Friday. As always, we hope that everybody is staying safe and staying well. Very happy today, as always, to be joined by the Brewmaster of Sawdust City. It is Sam Corbet, who is in, unfortunately, an empty saloon at Sawdust City. But better times ahead, and today we're excited to move on and talk about the next in the lager series. Of course, last week we were talking about Gravenhurst Steam. It was the California Common, which, by the way, Sam, I have to say that I'm actually angry that I haven't ordered more from the one that you guys sent me that we could do the tasting of last week, because we were doing our CFL draft show and everything, and I had a craving for that bready, malty flavor that was in that California Common, and it was a type of beer that I had not really been exposed to before, and I was kind of craving it afterwards, which I think is probably one of the ultimate compliments that you can pay a beer after only having it once, no?
Well, glad to hear it. I'm super stoked that we've introduced you to a new style, and then it's one you could take to. And that's kind of what we do here is we're in this part of the lager series, is to bring styles that people aren't necessarily familiar with and introduce them to something that may become one of their favorites, which is today, like we have a Dortmunder, which is, you don't see a lot of those in Ontario. Although the name signifies an export, which means it was meant to be sent out and travel, it doesn't do a lot. There's one style in particular, one beer in particular that I think you might have seen at the beer store or the liquor store. It's called DAB, D-A-B, which is in somewhat sort of the inspiration for this beer. It's a very sweet story that the brewer that designed it, Noelle, kind of came up with. And I do feel bad talking about it because I'm kind of stealing her story. So I'm going to let Noelle come in, and she can tell you about how Dab became Dad. And Noelle, why don't you come in and talk about it?
Amazing. Noelle, welcome to the Sawdust City Happy Hour Tastings, your inaugural journey on here. It is Dad, again, Dave's Affordable Dortmunder, 5.5%. Beautiful can design, as always, with all the Sawdust City beers here. But tell me the story behind Dad and how it became Dab to Dad.
Well, Sam asked all of the brewers here to come up with different recipe ideas or style ideas. And I thought about doing a Dortmunder. I've only ever had Dab before because you can't really find it very easily other places. And it's actually the beer that my dad drinks, and my mom calls it Dave's Affordable beer. So when I decided to make a Dortmunder, I thought I'd call it Dave's Affordable Dortmunder.
That's fantastic. And again, for people that don't really understand what the Dortmunder style is and why you decided to choose this, what is the background on the actual kind of creation and origin story of the style for you?
Well, the Dortmunder was created for the blue-collar worker. It's supposed to be sessionable, light, easy to drink.
Easy to drink.
So, for this Dortmunder in particular, I wanted to keep it really light, not a lot of bitterness, and try to get that the same flavor that my dad has actually been forced to grown to love, I guess. So yeah, and I used 4 malted Pilsner. It's a Czechoslovakian Pilsner by Raven, and Northern Spring. So I chose 4 malt because I had never used it before. I don't really know many people that have. So I thought it would be an interesting malt to use because the 4 malting process is very manual and very time consuming. So, it's kind of a labor of love, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it's funny you say easy drinking. When I had Little Norway, I was like, oh, this is incredibly smooth. First sip of this, my God. I mean, it's about as smooth as. My biggest question, though, is does Dave love it?
He does. He absolutely loves it.
And Dave is on the label. That is Dave.
That is
my father. This was on one of our last fishing trips into Algonquin.
That's fantastic. So is that actually the can art? Does that come from a picture that was taken on your trip to Algonquin?
Yeah, it comes from a photo that I took because I'm usually in the front of the boat. So yeah, and actually this beer came out right around the same time as my dad's birthday. And so it was a really nice way of giving him this as a gift. Last year, I bought him season tickets to the Ticats.
Nice.
For him and I to go. But we've been patiently waiting for games. And since we can't go this year, I figured I'd make him a beer.
That's amazing. Yeah, I have to imagine for somebody who enjoys beer that having a beer not only named after you, but in the style that you love. My dad would go crazy if I designed something that he loved and had his name on it. He would absolutely love that. But we joked earlier when Connor and Wade here from CFP were interviewing Sam about the whole tailgate ideology and what beers. And I loved Sam's response. It was you start a little bit lighter, maybe right before you go in, you hit a Lone Pine or something a little bit heavier. These are perfect for a 35-degree day at the Donut Box when you're tailgating on the concrete jungle that is Hamilton down by the stadium. And it's kind of this funny pairing, right, of the football that we do at CFP with the style that you've created here in the Lager Series. How happy were you when you got, Noelle, to the end product on this and you actually, right before it went to canning all the rest, and you said, yeah, I got this?
I was actually scared right up until it got packaged. Because I was hoping for this. And it surprised me even afterwards with just the crispness and like the head retention and just how it looks, how it tastes. And it's a 5.5, so it's that nice little middle spot where, you know, you're not drinking a heavy beer, but
yeah, you know what's funny about it? When on the first couple of sips, it tastes like it's one of those 3.8, 4.2, incredibly light, easy, smooth. But yeah, it's kind of sneaky with the 5.5, being able to get it up to that number.
I think one of the things that you did really well was when Noelle was researching the beer, she spent a lot of time looking at the water profile from Dortmund, which is a lot of German beers are very specific to the area that they're from. And the water or the terroir that it showcases in that beer. And the dryness of this and the minerality is really, that's what gives it that easy drinking crispness and belies the 5.5. So, I mean, she spent a lot of time really digging into that. And, you know, that it doesn't sound like something that would be that important in beer, but when it makes up 94.5% of it, it's pretty important, the water.
Water chemistry was probably the most difficult part.
Really? So I find that interesting because, like you're saying, Sam, I think a lot of people don't appreciate that that's part of the process. We all think about, because it's on the can, right? Where it's hops or it's percentage or it's IBU or whatever it is, bitterness or different notes. And we don't think about the vast majority of it being part of the flavor profile. But I don't even think people understand, because I certainly don't, that there's a vast variety of different ways to approach the actual water profile that goes into this.
What did you do? What was the things that you added and how did you go about it?
Well, it was looking at what their water chemistry was versus what we're getting from the town of Ravenhurst. And then just countering any kind of like sulfite or calcium or anything like that. So it was just kind of a add and subtract kind of balance to equal it out and make it as close to that water profile as possible.
How difficult is it to parse those differences, to understand? Because again, the average person, they get tap water and they go, oh, this is hard. And then they get a Brita and they go, wow, that's smooth. And that's the extent of how everybody thinks about water.
Well, luckily we have the ability to test the water and get what minerals are prevalent in our water at Ravenhurst. We have very base water here because we have the Canada Shield strips a lot of mineral out. And of course the town does what they do to the water. But then we also have historical data that we can look at. What is the water of Dortmund? And then we can approach that and say, okay, we have had X amount of calcium sulfate or this much calcium chloride. And then you can balance those minerals. And it does make a huge difference. When I first started, I was very much in this mindset that this is the water we have, so this is the water you get. So like, it's not like back in the day, Dortmund was changing their water profile.
Right.
They just took what they got. And it took me a long time to come around to like, you can play with the water it does. If you're going to try to mimic a style, it does help and really makes, it can elevate a beer from being good to great, or, just being okay to being, oh man, this is awesome. And it's those little tweaks the subtleties that make the difference in the end, especially with a beer as pale and as naked as this. There's not a lot to hide behind when you're making a beer as subtle as this. So you have to be, you got to bring your A game.
Does Dave ever get tired of it, Noelle?
No, not at all.
That's what
he won't be able to. It's a limited run, so
there you go.
Sooner than later, you won't be able to get it. So.
Well, I guess my last question for you is, has he bought out the entire stock to save away in the basement?
No, but my uncles and family have been trying to, and they're having a very difficult time recycling the can because it has this picture on it. So one of my uncles took to using tin snips to cut out the label, and now he's framing them.
That's amazing.
Sending them as gifts.
Well, it's a fantastic backstory. It's a great creation, and thank you for the wonderful beer. And again, the second in the 4 of the lager series that we have for this year here on CFP, as we're breaking down all of the Sawdust City beers that we have our hands on. Noelle, thank you for this. It's great.
Thanks again, Marshall.
Thank you, guys. Cheers. Appreciate it. And actually, Sam, I want to ask you, just before we get out of here, a couple of questions about what's coming up in June, because I saw that you guys sent out a release, a bit of a blog from you the other day on the Sawdust City beer website. And you guys have some really fun, creative, different stuff coming up in June that I just want to give people a heads up on so they can be aware of it as we head towards hopefully coming out of lockdown and restrictions and things of this nature. We can get people back in there in the saloon so that they can enjoy it if they're in person. If not, they can order it online using our promo codes at CFP. But what do you have in store? Because I actually read the description while my fiance was giving our son a bath the other night. And as I was reading it to her in the other room, about 10 different times she went, whoa, because she knows beer because she's always around me. And I'm always reading the back of cans and looking at this stuff. And she was really intrigued by a lot of the things that you guys are putting out here in June.
Yeah, we got some very interesting things coming up in June. The first, we have our Limmerlost coming back, which is an annual release. And that's a beer that we went out into the wilds of the Muskoka forest and foraged for our own yeast. And we've been developing that over the last 5 years. It used to be every year we would go into the forest and capture it again and again and again. But we've actually seeded a few barrels in our basement with that yeast. So it lives in those barrels now. So whenever we put beer in it, we can revisit that yeast.
Wow.
So we have 2 releases coming out this year. We have a blonde and a brune. So a brown and a blonde. And they're both very different. The blonde is much more sour and very tart and dry. And we added some lemon zest to it. I like to call it lemonade for adults. It's very drinkable, but at 7.2, it's scary drinkable. The brune is a blend of a barrel-aged brown ale that took about a little over 2 years to age out.
I read that. And that's crazy.
It took a long time to develop. And these yeasts, because they're not, there's not just yeast, but it's bacteria and whatever else fell from the forest. And sometimes it just takes an extra time. The barrel will tell you when it's ready. And it was screaming at us last year that it was ready. So we pulled it out and we blended it with some fresh Old Woody Alt. And then we actually let it sort of condition in the stainless for a while. And then we packaged it. And then it's been 6 months in the package as it's conditioned. And now we feel it's almost ready for release. So those 2 will be coming out in June. So it's a very long process.
Yeah.
Barrel-aged beers aren't simple. It's a lot of watching and maintaining and staying on top of it. On the other side, a quick sour beer like our Coriolis Effect, which is our kettle sour. We got 2 coming at you this next month. We got the straight up Coriolis, which is our 3.5%, very lemony, super crushable kettle sour. And along with the Coriolis comes the variants that we do. We always like to have fun with this because it's a great sort of jumping off point to bring flavors and add different aspects that you wouldn't expect. And the first one is our pineapple Scotch bonnet pepper. And I got to tell you, Scotch bonnet peppers. We've done jalapenos in the past, and they're very manageable because they're not that hot. Scotch bonnets are very, very hot. And like, I sweat when I eat barbecue chips. So like, playing with this is playing with fire. And I tried to steep one single pepper that I de-seeded and de-sebbed in 1 liter of water. And I gotta tell you, I let it sit for 2 hours, undrinkable. It was so hot. My lips hurt. I woke up in the morning and my lips still hurt. So then I did 1 pepper in 17 liters.
Wow.
And that was okay. That was manageable. So now we've narrowed it down. So we know the game. We wanted to bring a little bit of heat, but not be crazy, crazy hot. And I think we got it. So the pineapple should bring a lot of sweetness and tropical flavors. And that Scotch bonnet will bring, I love the flavor of pepper skin. Like, yeah. I think it's such a lovely flavor. And the heat, I mean, you still want to drink this. It's still a beer. So you get that sour, sweet, tropical, and then a little tang of heat in that pepper skin flavor. And I think it's going to be a wonderful combination. I have a bottle of this Scotch bonnet pineapple hot sauce in my fridge that I tried to, like, I wanted it to be that. It's from Grace. You can pick it up at a grocery store. It's fantastic on anything. But like, I don't want it to be super hot, but I want it to bring the same sort of flavor profile as that. And then I seem to be forgetting the one other one that we're releasing in June. Maybe you had the list there. Maybe you could tell me and I could.
I'll pull it up for you here because I don't blame you for forgetting them because they are all 4 of them very different and very fun. I got to say the 7.2 on that blonde and the idea of like the lemonade for adults that's wild. Like, I don't know how you guys jack it up that much and make it that smooth, but that's part of the fun of the process. So yeah, I've got the Mariposa Sun Lager is also on here.
Yeah, that's the first one. And, you know, it's been unfortunate that the Mariposa Folk Festival hasn't been able to go off the last 2 years. It was supposed to be their 60th anniversary last year. This is an iconic music festival that's been around, you know, more than half a century. And, you know, it's seen its fair share of ups and downs in the world. And on the eve of its 60th anniversary, to have it canceled was a bit of a bummer. But we had brewed this beer for them, the Mariposa Sun Lager, that was supposed to be available at the festival. We still released it in hopes that it would be around this year. And again, unfortunately, COVID has called an audible at the line of play, and we're not allowed to go again. So we're trying to keep it top of mind for next year, and eventually we'll be able to have their 60th anniversary. And this very, very crushable, sitting on the lawn, cross-legged, on your favorite blanket, listening to music on the lake up in Northern Ontario. You'll be able to do that again. It's a wonderful festival. They always have great musicians. It's an institution, and we're happy to be a part of it, and we're lucky to be able to brew a beer that we can share with them. So cross your fingers that we get it next year, but in the meantime, you can enjoy the beer.
Yeah, I love the idea of using beer as a promotional tool to keep something front of mind for everybody out there who loves that event or wants to get excited, because even you saying your legs crossed, sitting on the grass, listening to some great music by the lake, drinking a beer brings a smile to my face. Because like, man, I forget what that feels like, but I'm pretty sure it feels really damn good. And it's been an obviously very long time since we've had the opportunity to do all of those things. The last question that I have for you before we get out of here, I started doing this on Twitter before we have you on for the Sawdust City Happy Hour tastings, as always on CFP, just asking people, hey, what do you want to know about beer? Because I love your base of knowledge, Sam, and your experience in the business. And so we got one here from Michael Willems, who says, why don't you ask Sam which craft breweries are his favorites outside of Ontario? Outside of Ontario, do you have any favorites?
Outside of Ontario, man, I mean, I got lots of favorites. I got lots of friends. I've been very lucky to be able to travel across this country and make some beers and taste some beers and some wonderful breweries. I mean, out east, I got my pals at Garrison. I love Daniel and Brian out there. They're wonderful guys. They make great beer. They're one of the OGs in the Canadian craft beer scene. Freddie Tremblay in Quebec at Microbrasserie Charlevoix. Like, he makes some of the best Belgian beers I've ever had. Love that guy. Winnipeg, they got a great scene in Manitoba, like Nonsuch, doing some great stuff. The guys at Torque are doing great stuff. Moving to Saskatchewan, you got guys like Rebellion really pushing the envelope. In Alberta, Annex Brewing's doing some wonderful things. BC, we got the guys at Bomber. My friend Blair, he's awesome. The Mills brothers at Four Winds. The guys at Cannery, all wonderful breweries. I mean, this country's just, we're bursting at the seams with wonderful beer from coast to coast. And I'm happy to sing their praises. There's so much good beer out there. You know, you just got to sort of step out and try it. And I hope, you know, you get a chance to soon. Everyone will sort of open up as everything opens up, and get out there and support the local guys because it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And hearing you do the dance across the country like that, and also hitting so many of the places where there's CFL teams, just makes me want to get back on the road calling Hamilton Tiger Cats games on radio and online, because my favorite thing, and part of the reason that I fell in love with craft beer, was that I made a decision. You know, I was 24 when I started calling Ticats games. And at that point I was single, and I was, you know, getting on planes every week and jumping out and traveling around. And I came up with an idea of two things I wanted to do on every trip. One was find a local SPCA and walk some dogs. Cause I don't know if people know this, but there are so many SPCAs that are looking for volunteers to walk dogs for them, because otherwise they don't have the paid staff to be able to walk them as much as they need to, right? When they're in the shelters before they get adopted. So a lot of these places, if you call ahead and ask, they'll be like, yes, please come down and walk the dogs. So I'm like, great. I get to go take a dog on basically rent a dog for an hour and walk it and have some laughs and fun with it. And then the other thing was find a different craft brewer in any of the cities that have a CFL team. So Winnipeg, Calgary, Edmonton, Regina, and BC. And especially in the West, I mean, Toronto, Ontario area, whether it's, you know, Montreal might be the one exception. I would usually end up in some dive bar in Montreal on Saint Laurent or something like that, having beers. But in Ontario, I mean, I have them all the time through the LCBO, and I know the craft beer scene decently well. And so when I would go west, I would look for those places, and it was always fun to go and try and experience something different. So I'm with you. I implore people to go out and try something different and see what's out there, because like you say, it's even your mental map, having all of those places, you're scratching the surface.
Yeah, I've been uniquely lucky to have that opportunity to travel across the country and visit these great places. So I count myself very lucky, and I can't wait to get back out and visit them again. It's been a pause, but it's just been a pause. So future's a big place, and I can't wait to get to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Sam, thank you as always for this. Thank you for Noelle joining us as well, being able to hang out and have some fun with this. Again, it is Dave's Affordable Dortmunder. I'm sure everybody from Borussia Dortmund is drinking it in the stands over there in Germany and getting set for it. And we're looking forward to catching up with you again next week and having another great beer review.
Thanks again, Marshall. Have a great weekend.
Cheers, you too.